We have invited Tracy here today, and we will go ahead and turn the time over to Tracy. Just remember the background noise in the room. If you can kind of just keep it minimized, a little. I will help our online attendees. Thank you, Tracy.
Okay, welcome and thank you. Sorry that I'm after lunch right here. Hopefully you guys won't fall asleep on me. I'll keep it interesting enough and hopefully you all got a good lunch. As Rochelle mentioned, I am Tracy and I work for the Division of Aging and Adult Services. And one of the things that we are doing with this grant is we have a grant for the Administration on Community Living. And with this grant, we are doing a lot of outreach and education to a lot of our partners, which is a lot of you, and in particularly law enforcement. So you're going to see some, I thought about editing the slides and then I was telling Michelle, I decided to kind of keep them the same. This is a training that we developed with the steering committee for law enforcement partners and for prosecutors. And in that, we want to collaborate better. We often work on the same cases and we don't know that we're working on the same cases. And we want to be able to talk about ways that we can help each other, things that we need from you and things that, that we can help with within adult protective services. So there'll be some of the slides that I'm going to go through fairly quickly because they're very law enforcement heavy or prosecutor heavy. But I thought it would be important to keep them in here just so you can see what we're training. Those of you who work with it, I know not everybody does in the room, only about half the people, but if you do work for a law enforcement agency, maybe go back and say, hey, you could really use this training. We are trying to work, our goal is we have to train. It's a lofty goal. We said we'd train all law enforcement in the state. It's a 5-year grant, so we'll see if we do that or not. Okay, so I'm here to talk about not a fun topic, but I think in all of our jobs, we don't have a fun topic. We're here because we care about it. We're here because we care about people. We want to make a difference. We want to help. I'm going to focus on vulnerable adults in the state of Utah and what abuse, neglect, and exploitation looks like. I'm going to end with vicarious trauma and talking about some of the difficulties that we face as employees and team members on the job and that the importance of taking care of ourselves. And then I'm also going to end with some statewide resources that I hope you guys will find beneficial that you might not be aware of that will help you as you come across your work with vulnerable adults. All right, let's see if I can work this. Okay, so it's estimated that about 10% of people age 65 and older will be abused, neglected, or exploited in their lifetime. That's a low estimate, and it's pretty sad. 1 in 10 people in this room, when you turn 65, will most likely be abused, neglected, or exploited. After this training, I'm going to horrify you for those who have children, because guess who's going to probably be the ones doing the abusing and the exploiting. 60% will be your children and grandchildren, which is not fair. Okay, how many people know Utah is a mandatory reporting state? Most of the room? Okay, it is by law under Code 62A that any person who has a reason to believe that a vulnerable adult has been abused, neglected, or exploited by law is required to report to either Adult Protective Services intake or local law enforcement. Either one. That's why we're stressing so much our collaboration with crime victim advocates, with law enforcement, because we want to make sure we're working together on some of these cases and we make sure that cases are getting reported. So who's a vulnerable adult in the state of Utah? I flipped the slide too early. Anybody 65 or older, whether you like it or not. My dad was 90 and he told me he was not vulnerable. He was just fine. I said, well, sorry, Dad, it's the law. You're a vulnerable adult. Okay, so 65 and older automatically. Between the ages of 18 and 64, if you have a physical or mental impairment that significantly impacts your ability to care for yourself in one of 6 areas. So you can't provide personal protection, you can't obtain necessities, you can't care for yourself, such as basic needs like bathing, showering, getting to the grocery store, taking your meds. It can be that you don't understand the consequences. You don't understand what living in an abuse and neglect situation looks like. You don't know any different and you don't understand the consequences, or do you even have options to not live in that type of environment and to provide personal protection. What we can do, Adult Protective Services conducts protective needs assessments. We coordinate and make service referrals to our community partners. We have a lot of service agencies in the state that serve both aging and disability and mental health, and we coordinate and work with them to make those service referrals. In extreme cases where someone is in imminent danger to themselves or harm from others, we can do short-term protective services, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on. What we cannot do is, because we are dealing with adults, a lot of people think that we are similar to child protective services, and they don't understand. Why can't you just go in and take custody? Why can't you just go in and remove them from their home? They shouldn't be in that home. It's a completely different set of laws when you're dealing with somebody 18 or older, whether they have cognition or disabilities or not. We have laws because they're an adult. We can't just go in and remove them. We never take custody of them. We can't go and conduct welfare checks just because someone might be concerned about someone. We're going to talk about self-determination here in a minute, and we cannot provide any services without the voluntary consent. So a lot of people get frustrated and think APS do nothing. And we know that, but I don't think they see on the back end that we offer, but we cannot force anybody to take services. We can't force someone to take home health. We can't force someone to take their meds. All we can do is educate, encourage, and connect, and they have the choice in life whether to do it. So it's kind of tough. The only times that we can is if we end up getting a protective order, like I said, which I'll talk about later. And that's usually when we have to place them in a safe environment. And those are pretty extreme cases. I'll give you a couple of examples. The other thing that we do not do is that we have to have a living victim at the time of report. So we cannot investigate if the person is deceased. If they pass away during the case and we've already started the investigation, we can finish it. And then if we did find a crime was committed, we'll turn it over to law enforcement. But if we get the call that they suspect someone was abused or neglected and that was the cause of death, we have to turn that either over to law enforcement, or if they died in a facility such as a nursing home or an assisted living or a disability group home, we would turn that over to the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, because they do have jurisdiction to continue investigation after death. And we do not. Any questions on that? That was being tricky. How to report. I will send this, well, actually Rochelle already has it. Anybody who's interested in this presentation, you can take pictures of it, but it's also on our website. So if you go to daas.utah.gov, DOS is what it is, Division of Aging Adult Services acronym. This entire presentation is up there. All the resources are up there. But this is our intake reporting system. We have an email specifically set up for law enforcement. A lot of law enforcement officers just fax the reports into this. We do have a fax machine. Not too many people fax anymore, but we have them. We have our intake hotline. Now we are different than Child Protective Services. We are only open 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. We don't have the staffing capacity to be open 24 hours. So if you want to speak to a live person, you need to call during business hours. But we do have an online reporting tool, and you can make an online report there anytime, 24 hours. And that's the website there. Federal reporting, I don't know how many of you would get into this, but this is a great tool for law enforcement. This includes some of our larger things that especially older adults are being victimized, especially by scammers. And it's outside of our jurisdiction to investigate. And so here are 3 excellent resources for detectives, I should say. And if any of you guys get into this, it would be great, but it's particularly, this is meant for detectives who are looking at these cases. These are common cases are romance scams, mass mailing, telemarketing scams, the fake kidnapping, the lottery scams. So if you want to have a case screened for federal prosecution, you can contact Drew Scown at the FBI. He is Utah's representative. We have Travis Smoot, who is a Utah inspector, the U.S. Postal Inspector General, better say that correctly. And then we have AUSA Kevin Sunwall, who is fantastic. He has an entire team focused on financial crimes. Typically, their threshold is $5,000 or above, but they are so impassioned on reducing financial crimes in the state of Utah. They're willing to look at cases with a lower threshold. So he's given his cell phone number. He is fantastic, and he wants people to contact him when people have been victims of financial crimes. They really want to enhance their team and their response. So APS intake criteria, what we accept and what we don't accept. And the first one kind of sounds facetious, Because we accept any credible allegation of abuse, neglect, and exploitation, and we don't accept it when it does not involve an allegation of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. I don't know about any of you, but we get calls that are not abuse and neglect and exploitation. We get calls that my neighbor has lots of cars in their yard. I don't think they're okay. All right. We get calls that, you know, we think that my mom gave away $100 to her grandson, and we don't think that's right. Okay. She chose to give him $100. That's fine. Now, different if she's exploiting her. But we get a lot of calls, as I imagine you guys, that people call APS. We get tons of hoarding calls. You know, their home is dirty, or you know what? They have 6 cats. Okay, they have a right to have 6 cats. You know, if that's against city ordinances, you can call the city, but they don't involve abuse and neglect. So we have to put that in there because we have to screen out probably about 45% of the calls that come in because they do not rise to the criteria of abuse and neglect. And we'll talk about what does rise to the criteria. We do not take cases where there's not a current allegation. And we get a lot of calls of we'll go to a training or we'll go to a senior center and we'll get the word out and we'll say, oh, well, 10, 15 years ago, this happened. Can you open a case? And we can't go back 10, 15 years. We can go back up to a year, but it really needs to be a current allegation and something that's currently affecting them. We have a lot of people that go into therapy and the therapist will call and say, hey, they disclosed this, it happened when they were a kid, and that's outside of our jurisdiction. We can't open those types of cases. We do not have authority to investigate on tribal lands. Per our state code, we have to have an MOU, a memorandum of understanding in place for us to investigate on tribal lands. And currently we do not have any in the state of Utah in place with any of our tribal leaders. So what happens is if we get a case and the abuse occurred on tribal lands, we take a report just like we would any other report. And then we do an agency notification form and we notify the appropriate tribal authority and then they investigate. We are not involved. We do not investigate when people live in a skilled nursing home and a smaller amount of theft occurred. We do investigate if a family member is exploiting them, or maybe a staff member got a hold of their finances or took things from them. But we get a lot of calls around Christmas time. My blanket went missing, my gift card went missing. I left $10 in my room and I came back from lunch and it wasn't there. We wrote in, we just don't have the capacity to go out on calls like that. We can't find out who did it. We have no idea. The facilities need to be responsible for that. And then we used to investigate scams and fraud till about 3 years ago, and they became huge and our caseloads just became too large. We did not have the capacity to investigate. So we had to make some and we couldn't get more funding and we couldn't get more positions in the legislature. So we had to make a decision that if it is an unknown perpetrator and it involves a scam like the telemarketing scams or the computer takeover scams, we would no longer investigate those and wrote that into our administrative rule. And we refer those over to our partners, whether it be the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, the Securities Exchange Commission, or the Consumer Protection Bureau. And I'm going to give you some resources at the end. If you have somebody who comes in and has been a victim of a scam, who they can call. I'll give you one in particular that is really good that works directly with people. Because if you go to any of the other websites, they're a little complicated. So our investigative process, we typically start a case, we get a referral. Our investigators have time frames, just like I'm sure all of you guys have some time frames in your roles. We start a case within 3 days. And what that means is if you were the person making the call, you will most likely get a call from the investigator, just kind of confirming what was reported, seeing if there's any new information, maybe verifying the address of the victim to make sure they're going to the right place. And maybe just asking, are there any safety concerns? Is there anything I need to be aware of that wasn't initially reported? Sometimes you think about stuff 3 days later, and then sometimes by 3 days later, the situation's changed. Maybe the perpetrator's in jail. You know, we just don't know. So we always do those calls to check. If it is an emergency call, meaning someone's in imminent danger or harm, we contact within the hour. And then our cases, we have to see the victim within, if it's an emergency, we have to see the victim within 24 hours. If it is not an emergency, we have to see the victim within 5 days, 5 business days. We go out and we look at the allegations. If there are additional allegations, the investigator will add those to the case, and then we make a finding. We have 3 findings on our case findings. We have without merit, meaning that there's an affirmative finding that it didn't happen. For example, someone calls in, they live in a filthy home, it's dirty, it's disgusting, they shouldn't live there, they go out, the home's immaculate. Like all the evidence to the eye is completely different. Or we go out, they say, hey, this person doesn't know what they're doing, they're giving all their money away, it's crazy. We go out, the person has full capacity, they're fully capable, they know what they're doing, they're making a choice. It didn't happen. We have inconclusive, which is where about 80 to 90% of our cases fall in between, because it means that we just don't have enough evidence to prove one way or other. Our level of evidence is a preponderance of evidence. That's the minimum level we have to meet. And so a lot of what we get is he said, she said, because a lot of what we investigate is family. And a lot of victims will not stand up to their family. So it might be occurring, but if they deny it and they have capacity, there isn't much we can do about that. And then we have supported, meaning that we found with a preponderance of evidence that we believe the finding existed. If we support against a perpetrator, what does that mean? Well, if a crime was committed, we turn that over to law enforcement. From crime victim advocates, we typically actually get those cases from you. So you guys call us and say, hey, we think this person, that crime was committed. This is the person I'm working with. And we're very, very appreciative of the calls that we get from crime victim advocates and helping and working together and in trying to get them connected to services. Because you guys have things that you can do that we can't, and we have things that we can do that you can't. So it's very beneficial to work together. Our findings, though, we rely on law enforcement and the local jurisdiction to prosecute. We don't have any say. All we can go out and determine is if we found enough evidence. We have no authority to press charges against somebody. Our findings are administrative. So what that means is Utah is one of the several states in the nation that has a perpetrator database. All of you probably had to have checks ran. We have checks ran, so anybody that works in a setting with vulnerable adults, so say they work at the state hospital, they work at the developmental center, they work in any group home for people with disabilities, any nursing home, any mental health home, any home that has to go through the Department of Health for licensing, we have a perpetrator database that they have to run their names to that database. If they get a hit, meaning that there's a supported finding against them, it could affect their ability to be employed in the state. So that's what our findings are. Perpetrators have the right to appeal their findings with us, and they go before an administrative judge and present their case. And then the administrative judge determines if they're going to uphold our finding or if they're going to overturn it. If they overturn it, we have to change the finding in our database, and they will not get a hit when their name is read. Any questions on that? Okay, so here's where the tough part of APS is that it's written right in our code, Utah code. We have to respect the lifestyle of the individual and the choices of the individual. Do we always agree with the choices? Does our investigators who do a tough job, do they have to go out to a home? Do they have to walk away from situations where it just keeps them up at night? Absolutely. We have to walk away sometimes with somebody who's choosing to let the person in their home hit them. We can call the cops. If the person doesn't want to press charges, oftentimes the person's out of jail the next day, right back in the home. The person's saying, oh, no, they won't do it again. A lot of you who work with DV know this story, right? And it can be really, really tough. So it's not that our team doesn't want to do anything. There's just times and restrictions that they're bound by that they have to respect. Self-neglect cases are really, really tough because until it gets really, really bad, there's not much we can do. We have a lot of people that self-neglect, that fall on that borderline. In fact, I just staffed a case over at the senior center today. They fall in that borderline of making horrible choices and milking the community and burning out all of their caregivers, but they seem to get by. And we can't come in and just say, you have to go live in a nursing home. We don't have that right until it gets to the point where they're in absolute danger to themselves. And then I already mentioned all services are voluntary. One of the things that we really try to work through, and this is where the importance of working together with law enforcement and crime victim advocates and with prosecutors is important. I know that I testified on a case last week. We did the case 5 years ago. The victim has since passed away, but when you think about when a victim goes through something and the people that you work with, and then to have the case prosecuted 5 years later, and they often go a year, 18 months without hearing from anybody. And every time we contact them, we're reintroducing the events that occurred. And that can be very traumatizing. I'm sure you guys have, y'all have a whole probably separate training on trauma-informed care. So one of the things that we try to work through, and one of the things that is so important that we work together, is that that constant line of communication is going on between us, and more importantly for the victim, so that they're not going between these large gaps. They know if criminal charges are going to be pressed. They know if they're going to have to go testify in court, that they're not surprised by any of this over this long period of time. So capacity, we go out and we look at capacity. One of the things that a lot of people get confused about is we're not medical doctors, we're not psychologists. We don't do competency. We don't go out and determine if the person has competence. So people can be frustrated with our capacity decision because they look at overall competency, and that's not what we do. We don't have the training or the certifications or the staff for that. We look at, do they understand the allegation in front of them? So do they know what sex abuse is? Do they know what financial exploitation is? Do they understand the concept? Do they understand how to make a decision? Do they understand, yes, I'm being exploited, or no, I don't know what that means. I didn't realize that was exploitation. Do you understand if someone's harming you, who could you call? Well, I don't know who to call. Oh no, I would call 911 if someone did. Well, if someone stole my money, I'd go right to my bank and stop it. Do they understand the processes of what to go through? And do they understand they have options and choices? Do you understand you have a right to not have your son living in your home and hit you? Do you understand that? Yes, I understand it. I get it. I'm still gonna let him live here. Or no, I didn't realize that. I didn't think I had any option. What am I supposed to do with it? They didn't know they could call law enforcement. They didn't know they could have them trespass from their home. They didn't know they could get a protective order. So we look at understanding and decision abilities as it relates to it. And that's what we consider capacity. It's not overall competency. So that's one of the things that we can help with. Most of our staff are social service workers, which I think a lot of you guys are as well, most of you are probably. And then we also have 3 licensed clinical social workers on staff, that when we have tougher cases of capacity, where we really need a second opinion, or if we have to determine perpetrator capacity, because we have people with disabilities who perpetrate in group homes on people with disabilities. Do the perpetrators have capacity? Do they understand intent? Do they really know what they're doing? We can call in some of our licensed clinical social workers to help with those determinations. Oh, well, I skipped ahead a little bit. Okay, so our vulnerability for capacity is we have 3 categories again. Full capacity, meaning they understand every area, they're able to make choices. We have limited capacity, which is where about, I think the last data I looked at a couple months ago, which is about where probably 45 to 50% of our cases fall. They're in that limited range. And that's the range where sometimes our hands get tied because they're maybe have just slight cognitive delay, maybe early onset dementia. Maybe they somewhat know what their finances are, but they have a POA that's helping them, so they don't fully know. But they know they get Social Security, they know they get a pension, but oh yeah, so-and-so manages for me that, so they can't pay any of their bills, and they fall in that limited range. And then we have lax capacity. Those are people full on maybe profound intellectual disability, maybe in a complete mental health crisis at the time, not on their meds, schizophrenia, and they just can't determine reality. Or we have just older adults that have declined so far that they lack the capacity to understand their situation. But most of our cases fall within full and limited. We also do protected needs assessment, and we have to determine when we leave that case if the person's at risk. And also if they are at risk, are they choosing to live in risk? So we typically, if someone doesn't have capacity, we don't leave someone that we identify as being at risk. However, if they are at risk and they choose to continue to live that way, we do have to walk away from the case if it's an active choice. Just to give you a little data on 2021's data, it was really interesting. Nationwide, cases went up during COVID, not in Utah. We always we follow different trends here in Utah. I don't know why, but our cases went down. Do we think abuse went down during COVID? No, but why did it? Why? I'm going to give you 2 stats here, and then I'm going to ask you a question. I'll give you the other stats first. So we investigated 4,000 cases, which was significantly down. The female-male range stays pretty close. We have slightly more females that we investigate than males. 64% of allegations occurred in their own home. That stays about the same. We do investigations in facilities, but most of our investigations occur in the person's home. And then here's the other statistics. 51% of alleged perpetrators were family members or relatives. That significantly went down. So our cases went down, and who was identified as a perpetrator as a family member went down. But did abuse go down?
Well, I know that my daughter works at an assisted living facility and they were all on lockdown most of COVID.
Yep. Yeah, they were all on lockdown most of
Big
COVID.
lockdown, no one coming in, out.
Yep.
So I know that was very, very typical. She said she felt like she was a prison guard.
Yep. And as did the residents, right? We still have facilities who they don't do activities. They stay in the room 2 years, still sitting in their rooms. Oh, I won't go off on that tangent. Okay, but let's go back to this. But yes, so we have perpetrators, many of who lost their jobs during COVID, many who are living with their caregivers. We had senior centers shut down for a year. We had facilities shut down for a year. Do we think abuse stopped all of a sudden during COVID? Was stress high during COVID? Okay, but they're living with their perpetrators, the victim's not getting out to their typical things or not getting in to see. And so we think it just got more hidden. We don't know that. We can't guarantee it, but it's a pretty good guess. Okay. So of those cases investigated, we also investigate more allegations than cases because oftentimes cases have more than one allegation. So we investigated 5,800 allegations. And now 8 years running, Utah, financial exploitation. We are a loving, trusting folk, and we want to give away our money. Nationwide self-neglect is the #1 allegation. In Utah, we are financial exploitation. And we even thought that when we stopped taking scams and consumer fraud, it would go down. It has not. Financial exploitation stays up there on top. Then we have emotional and caretaker. Those are always 2 and 3. They flip back and forth as to which one's #2 and which one's #3. But the reason being is typically when someone's being exploited, it is common that they are also either being neglected or they're being abused. So we're going out to not only investigate exploitation, typically caretaker neglect as well, because there's some other things that are not going on in the home that need to be. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a case scenario. And as you, I'm going to ask, well, it's kind of hard with the microphone, but I hate doing all the talking. Is there anyone that would be willing to come take this microphone and read this case scenario for me? And you get to be recorded and you get to be online virtually. It's an exciting opportunity. I didn't bring, well, I have some M&M. I'll give you my M&Ms that are in my bag.
I got some raw eggs, I'll contribute as well.
What's your name? What's your name?
There's the raw eggs, right?
You don't have to give me candy.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I hate doing all the talking. Okay.
Mary and Fred are a couple in their late 70s. Fred requires total care with all areas of daily living. Mary is able to provide for her own personal care, but needs assistance with shopping as she no longer drives. Mary and Fred want to move to an assisted living or nursing home, but have had a difficult time finding one where they can stay together as their level of care needs are different. Mary and Fred allowed Fred's daughter and family to move into their home to help care for them. Mary provides all of Fred's care and is fearful of his daughter, but tries to keep the peace for Fred's sake. When they moved in, Mary and Fred were moved to a bedroom in the house, and that is their space. Fred's daughter will pick up groceries and take them to medical appointments, but provides no other care and does not allow Mary to have access to their money. Fred's daughter and son-in-law have signed a quitclaim deed to the home. Fred's daughter charges them rent in the sum of $5,000 per month, which is the sum of their income.
Okay. So we've got a little, do we have any red flags here? All right. Okay, we're gonna come back to this case scenario in about 20 minutes. I'm gonna give you some information. We're gonna come back and we're gonna look at this case again. We're gonna say, did abuse, neglect, or exploitation occur? Then I'll give you some facts. This is one of our cases. The only thing that has been changed is the names, and then I will share the additional horrors that occurred after this. Okay. All right, so let's talk about abuse, neglect, and exploitation and what it is in Utah. We go by code 765-111. Wait, is that screen shaking to you guys, or is it just me? Okay, I'm like, are we having an earthquake, or? I didn't know if it was my vision going in and out. It's like, Okay, so we have 11 allegations in the state of Utah. A couple of them are fairly new within the last 2 years. We have physical abuse. What is physical abuse? Hitting, punching, biting, pinching, scratching. Yeah, any sort of physical harm that you are doing to an individual. Okay. What is emotional abuse? Not letting them see family. That could fall in isolate. Yep. I could, well, that, yes, that would have been until we got a new allegation. Yes. Threats, yelling, demeaning. Okay. What's sexual abuse? That a little bit louder. Sexual act without consent, right? It could be rape, it could be sexual assault, it could be touching, groping. Okay. What's unlawful restraint? Holding. We do unlawful restraint in a lot of facilities. People do unlawful holds, physical restraints, holding them in PSR rooms, personal timeout rooms.
Would it be like taking away a wheelchair? Or
It could be taken away. Yeah, unlawful restraint could be taken away or locking someone in and not letting them go. Yep. Okay, deprivation of treatment. What's some examples of that? Not allowing them to have health care. Okay, withholding their meds. Yeah, I was just gonna give that example. So you could have financial exploitation and you could have deprivation of treatment because they're stealing their opioids. They're not allowing them to get treatment. And then we have people that go doctor shopping because they don't have their medication. So they start doctor hopping because their kids are stealing their medication and they won't tell their doctor what's going on because they don't want the doctor to know it's their family member that's stealing. Okay, we have isolation. Now, isolation is a newer allegation. It used to fall under either emotional or caretaker. However, Medicaid fraud unit about a year, well, I guess it was in 2 legislative sessions ago, we pulled out isolation as now it's a standalone allegation. So what would isolation be? No family access, no phone, withholding mail, locking someone in a room. We get cases where, oh, they have autism. I have to lock them in a room to keep them safe. They have dementia. I have to lock them in a room to keep them from wandering. Okay, they have a right to have freedom within their own home. Is it tough? Is it tough to have eyes on an adult that may want to run away and escape at every opportunity they can get? It is tough, but we have things that are in place that allow access and allow freedom. We have alarms, we have wander guards, we can do things without restricting them and keeping them physically. One of the worst cases of isolation we saw is we had a young lady with disabilities. She was a wander risk in a rural area, and she was handcuffed to a picnic table in their kitchen, and that is how she lived her life. When we went out and we got involved, great big marks from the handcuffs. But they're like, she runs away. We can't watch her all the time. So we handcuff her to the kitchen table. And at night they lock her away. Not a way to live a life. There's services out there that we can do to help.
How was that resolved?
We supported against it and she was removed from that. She was put into a residential group home. Some of it, and I don't know what happened to her, but some of that could be medication. Some of that could be managed with medication. Slowing down your thought processing, thinking. Some of that can be managed with 24-hour supervision. We get caregiver, and don't get me wrong, as we talk about some of these, we have a lot of neglect that's intentional. We have a lot of neglect that is not intentional. Anyone in this room that has ever been a caregiver, it is tough work. When you have a child that harms themselves, harms others, has outbursts, when you have someone with dementia that is yelling, that doesn't recognize you, and this is your parent who you've grown up with your whole life, and now they're screaming and yelling at you, you try to bathe them, they whack you, it is really, really tough. So just as you probably know, job burnout's big, so is caregiver burnout. So not all neglect is intentional. But you've got to do things within the limits of the law, and when you are burnout, You've got to recognize and step back and say, I got to get some help, or you know what, I cannot safely care for this person anymore. And unfortunately, the person might have to go to a group home, they might have to go to a nursing home, but that is better than you becoming a perpetrator and you starting to inflict abuse. It's tough. I don't have, yeah, I mean, none of us have fun jobs, but you know, it's really hard talking about some things. Okay, let's talk about neglect. We have two forms of neglect. We have caretaker and self. What is caretaker neglect? Yep, caregiver's not taking care of them, basic needs, right? Not getting to the doctor, not buying them food, not getting them showering. And this really has to fall for a designated caregiver, right? Someone who has assumed that responsibility. The person needs help caring for themselves, and a designated, and that could be a paid caregiver, or it could be a family member caregiver. What is self-neglect? Yep. When they don't want to take care of themselves, right? Okay, and self-neglect, as I mentioned, it's really hard because we got people that might be hoarders. Is that self-neglect? No. What if they're hoarders and they have no heat, no running water, they have 20 animals, they walk in feces, they have no refrigeration? Is that self-neglect?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so you've got to find that boundary of, okay, are they just not living the way people like, and is their home just a tad messy? Gross. Is their home really bad, or is it coming to the point where they are not meeting basic needs and they're a danger to themselves? That would be self-neglect. Okay, we have financial exploitation. That one's fairly, I don't want to say cut and dry, because it's not always cut and dry in the realm of things. But when someone's using someone's property, money, or assets for the benefit other than the vulnerable adult, and that also is where we count stealing medications, because we don't have a stealing medications allegation, so it goes under financial. Criminal activity. Anybody have any idea what that one is? We don't use this one too much in the state of Utah, but it's becoming more and more popular, like with money mules. People are using older adults as money mules. The one case we did support against back when I supervised some of the investigative team is we had a young lady with Down syndrome. She was going into her parents' home. She was getting into their safe, stealing money, stealing jewelry, and taking it out to her brother and his girlfriend so they could go buy drugs. Who's the perpetrator? Is it the young lady with Down syndrome who's doing the stealing? No. Who is it? The brother, right? She was just trying to make brother happy, girlfriend happy. They'd go buy her an ice cream cone. Okay, so they're the perpetrators on the case, even though the vulnerable adult was the one committing the crime. So they were using a vulnerable adult for their own benefit. Okay, we have sexual exploitation. How is that different from sexual abuse? Anybody know? I don't expect you to know this one. Not too many people do. This is like pornography, consent of photography. Anytime they're transmitting is the key word. Pictures that they don't have consent to transmit, taking inappropriate pictures and sharing them without the vulnerable adult's consent and/or knowledge. And then we have personal dignity. This is a new allegation. Again, we have to thank Medicaid fraud. They are fantastic partners and fantastic advocates in our state for vulnerable adults. They put this as a new allegation to our statute 3 years ago now. Personal dignity exploitation. We were finding that people that worked in facility type base, such as assisted living and nursing homes, any of you could go Google right now, funny stories about older adults in nursing homes. You'll see some funny ones. You'll see some people being funny and know that they're being filmed, and you'll see some really demeaning ones. Look at what my job's like. Someone sitting on a toilet, someone sitting in their own vomit, having to change a diaper, someone laying back and drooling. This is what I get to do every day. And then mean, nasty comments on social media and on Facebook. So this got put through. Medicaid fraud is successfully processed, I believe, 6 cases right now of staff members who go in, take demeaning and degrading pictures without a vulnerable adult's consent and/or knowledge, and then post it on social media. That is now a crime. And I am very, very grateful for it. Any questions on Utah's allegation types? I say I'm depressing you. I'm going to warn you, it's going to get worse before it gets better. The next section, it's not going to get any better. Okay. So we're going to talk about the physical sides, but I do want to give people a warning for about the next 10 minutes. If you are someone who is very sensitive to photographs, you are going to see some really tough things to see. So online, just know, turn away and listen. In person, if you want to step out, the next 2 or 3 slides are going to be tough to see. So I'm just letting you know that. Okay, physical signs. Injuries that are inconsistent from the stories. They don't have causes for the pain. We just had this conversation this morning. How do you know if it's a bruise from abuse, and how do you know if it's a bruise from falling or from someone just getting older, someone having diabetes? Look for patterns. Someone tells you they fell down the stairs and they hit their face. Most likely their whole face is going to be bruised, not have a punch mark in their eye. They say they ran into a wall. Typically, you don't have a handprint when you run into a wall. You don't have fingerprints. You don't have cigarette burns. Look at the story to see if it matches what they're telling you. Cuts, puncture wounds. Sad thing when you go into people that have people who smoke in the home, cigarette burns are a big thing, and they are not often where you can see them. They are typically in places on the chest and on the back, so it's tough to catch them. Dehydration, you're going to have grayer skin. Your eyes are going to start to get sunken in. If someone's looking, it looks like they're just drowning in their baggy clothes and they have poor coloration and their eyes are sunken in, most likely they are either dehydrated or malnutrition. Forced isolation, we've talked about. Inappropriate administered medications. Look at their soiled bedding and clothes. One of the worst cases I've worked with law enforcement on is they got a call to go in and do a welfare check from DCF on some children from CPS. They went in expecting to find children in distress in the home. The children were not in great shape. What they did find was a 90-year-old grandmother who was laying on a couch. The couch had been rotted with feces and urines down to the springboards. And they found this lady with maggots all in her vaginal area. No one even knew that the 90-year-old grandmother was in the home. They had her there. They were living off her Social Security, clearly not taking care of her, and the officer was distraught. He said, it's the worst case I've ever seen, and it stuck with me. I have 5 cases that have stuck with me over my years, and it's one of them that has stuck with me because they went in for the children. People knew the children were in danger. No one even had a clue that the grandma was what they found. So it's horrible. Frequent use, hospital shopping. Again, that goes back to the opioid use. They're doctor shopping, usually because people are taking, some people, older adults, are addicted to drugs, flat and simple. But oftentimes it's because someone's taking their medications, and it could be a paid caregiver. We have home health agencies that go in and steal medications. They know who they can steal from and they know who they can't. They know who has the ability to report. Very easy to replace a multivitamin with a Lortab. Someone who has slight decline is not going to know the difference, other than they know they're in pain and they don't feel good and they don't know why. Lack of necessities, food, water, utilities, and then lack of personal effects. You go into a home and the perpetrator has great big screen TVs, all the video games, all the nice couches, and you go back in the victim's room and there's a mattress on the floor. Oh, that's because they destroy things, or oh, it's because they don't like to have a lot of things in their room. Not typically. Sometimes kids with autism that need to sleep in an environment with not a lot of stimulation, but not too many cases that should be legit. Okay, let's talk about this young man. He wasn't young, he's an older adult, but what are some of the behavioral signs? This is a Utah County case. A few years ago, Office of Public Guardian had to step in and become his guardian and get him placed in a safe environment. Is this the way to live? But the kids had to go to work every day. What were they going to do with it? Does it look like it's summertime? Okay. He was given a bucket to urinate and defecate in, and given a dog bowl with fruits and vegetables every day. And that's how he spent his days. Finally, he didn't say anything, didn't speak, nonverbal, sat out in the shed every single day while the family went to work. Neighbor driving by saw it, happened to drive by, see him because it was in the back of the house. Not a lot of people know it. He lived like this for quite some time. Fear, anxiety, isolation, resignation. He didn't know that this wasn't the life he had a right to live. He thought this was life. They just become ambivalent. They don't cry out for help because they don't know that they can. Look for contradictory statements. Hesitation to talk openly. Are they confused? Are they disoriented? Are they not able to give you a story? Perpetrators, we've talked about 60% in Utah are family members. Typically, this last year it went down to 50, but typically they're 60. They prevent the vulnerable adult from speaking. They have anger or indifference. You don't know what it's like to care for them. If you were here, you would understand. You think they're sweet, but they're not. They're very difficult. Okay, history of substance abuse and mental illness is big with perpetrators. Criminal behavior, a history of family and violence. Well, they used to beat me as a kid. It's just part of what our family does. Okay, the cycle doesn't stop. Lack of affection or over affection in cases of sexual abuse, being inappropriate. Conflicting accounts of the incidents. Are they able to just look you in the eye and say, oh yeah, I fell, yeah, I tripped over my shoe, I was something on the stairs, or are they stuttering, are they hesitating, are they trying to cover something up? Is there nervousness about what to say? Are people withholding affection? Very common in perpetrators. Do we think that trauma happens overnight? Okay, we forget that to get to this, none of these stories happened within a 24-hour period, a week's period. We have a lady on the left who was being beaten by her son, who had moved in with her. Everybody in the neighborhood thought he was the greatest caregiver, caring for her, taking care of all of her needs. One day he beat her so badly she was able to get out in the yard, crawl across the grass to a neighbor and get some help. But she suffered that for almost a year. The next guy, family was taking care of him. They said, we went in once a day and changed him. We didn't notice that. Do you get a bed sore that goes down to your pelvic bone if you're being changed every day by your family members? Are you so emancipated that your backbone's poking out? Okay. Again, they looked at us like they were crazy. Like, we take care of him. We didn't notice anything like that. Are you rolling him over? Then we have a young man with disabilities. Cutest young man ever. Big smile. Everybody just thought he was cute, happy, and he was. He's the happiest guy you can see even now. Look at that big smile. Wore baggy clothes, wore baggy jeans, wore baggy sweatshirts. Lived in a group home. 24-hour supervision. One day, somebody went to hug him and they thought, this isn't right. I can feel skin and bone. They pulled him into an office and said, hey, they had people in the room. Do you mind if we have you take your sweatshirt off? We're really concerned. We just want to give you a once over. Emancipated, he passed away. His organs had shut down so far at that point. What breaks my heart, look at the smile. And he passed away shortly thereafter because he was emancipated so bad. So we look at trauma and we look at what people go through and we look at how did anyone not catch these things? Everybody thought the son was a great caregiver. The family said they didn't notice that. They were changing him every day. 24-hour group home, and he's being starved to death. How do we not catch these things as society? And it really makes us wonder. Hence why we try to go out, we try to do education, we try to do outreach, and I'm going to get the pictures. Oh, we got one more. And then it does get a little bit better, I'm telling you. But how do we not catch these things, and who is not reporting? How many eyes are on and turn the head or just think, oh, it's okay. Oh, someone's going to report that. That's what I heard this morning. We staffed a case and every indication possible was 4 people in the room were staffing this case with me. And I said, have any of you reported? I looked up the case that hadn't been reported. And I said, okay, here's the problem. Not one person in this room is reported. And it was a clear case of neglect. So we have to keep our eyes open. We have to report. Can we always do things? Maybe not. But it's our obligation to report. So that's the one message I want you to leave because people we forget about the trauma people face. We're going to talk, we'll end with some trauma care too as well. Let's talk about self-neglect. So when it gets to self-neglect, how bad is it? This is self-neglect. Just living in a dirty home is not self-neglect. Not taking their medications because they don't want to is not self-neglect. This is self-neglect. No running water, no running heat, no running toilet, clearly not getting medical care. Inadequate, I talked about that, animal feces in the home. They did have animals, you can't really tell because it's pretty dirty, but there was animal feces in the home. Not cashing monthly checks, not getting medical care, no fresh food. Everything was rotten in the refrigerator, giving away money inappropriately, maybe dressing inappropriately. Okay, for those that are listening or those that want to come back in the room, feel free. The horrible pictures are over. Okay, so what can we do? One of the things that we can do is when we do see someone who's in imminent danger of themselves or others, is we can go to court and get a protective order. With that being said, we have some guidelines. Like I mentioned earlier, we cannot take custody of an adult. They have the right to live their life the way they want to. But if they get to the point where they lack capacity and they are in imminent danger to themselves or someone else is harming them, and there's no family member to step in or anybody to step up and help care for them, we can go to court, get an emergency order, and we can place them in a safe situation. And that's when we don't take custody, we have authority to place them in a safe situation. We also have the challenge of, if there's nobody else involved, typically we can place them in a safe situation, such as a nursing home or a group home, hopefully, that where they're safe. But if there's a perpetrator involved, we can't block that perpetrator from coming unless they're arrested, and we rely on law enforcement in these cases because that perpetrator can come and pull them right back out. So that's where we really have to work with law enforcement. And as we do our training, we talk about that. If we have to place someone, we don't want 10 days later that perpetrator walking into that nursing home and pulling them right back out, because we can't block it. We can't go stop them. We have no arresting authority. So we have to work on that. But we can help with that. We also don't have authority to transport victims, which is really odd because we work in the same division under the Department of Human Services, and CPS can transport. We can't. But it is what it is. I just put that joke in there because I find it odd. And then, like I said, we can assist. We have contracts with placements throughout the state. And if someone is in danger, we will be able to, if we have an open case, they meet our criteria, we'll be able to get them into a safe situation if needed. I'm understanding financial exploitation. Just making sure that really isn't that older adults are targeted. We have a lot of older adults in the state of Utah. It's estimated that 77% of all the assets in the United States are by people 50 and older. So they're targets because that's where the money is. And who do you think knows they have the money? There's two big people. Who? Family and the thing that we all love in the world, scammers. Scammers. They're fantastic at their job. They're fantastic at their job, and they know who to target. Okay, so what? Oh, I just went. What we do? So what makes people more vulnerable to exploitation? People who are relying on others, people who have shared accounts, people who grief, isolation, people who have mild cognitive impairment. This statistic hurts my brain because I think it's already setting in on me and I'm in my 50s. It's estimated that 20% of people age 65 and older are going to have mild cognitive impairment. So, 1 in 5 of us in this room, that's us. I'm already one of them, so I'll take away one of them from there. But, it's just happening. It's just naturally part of aging. And, a lot of us in this room are going to need some help at some point in our life. It's really important that we make sure we have trusted people in place who can help take care of us and follow our wishes. And if we have family members, that we make sure that they're being safe and protected as well. Financial impairment is the earliest sign of cognitive impairment. It's typically the first thing that goes. Struggling with managing those finances and understanding it. Sometimes people are still even able to pay their bills because they've done it for years. They know they need to write a check or they know they need to pay something, but then really understanding their finances is tough. I trained at the senior center here yesterday, and there's about 35, 40 seniors in the room. But I asked them, how many of you check your accounts weekly? Not one hand went. They were just like, we don't check it. I thought, not as great. Not that they were all being exploited, but I was like, okay, got to check them. It's estimated that 1 in 20 older adults will be financially exploited in their lifetime. Perpetrators control people with their finances. They threaten to move them to nursing homes. They say, would you rather live in a nursing home? Would you rather live here than live with me? And more importantly, family members threaten with those darn grandkids. Well, if you don't want us around, then fine. I won't come around, and guess what? You won't see little Susie and Joey either. They threaten them with pets. I am an animal lover. I have my pup with me. I have my friend babysitting him right now. But I can't tell you how many cases we get of older adults, and they're also abusing the pet. And I get enraged by it. But that's one of the ways they can get to people, is because they harm and threaten their pets. They control by promises. And my favorite response of perpetrators, and I've talked to perpetrators that have literally said this to me, is What does it matter if I take it now? It's gonna be mine one day. Okay, but it's not right now, so let's not. You know, I just like, there's just this entitlement of, you know, we're gonna be entitled to this all one day, so it doesn't matter if we take it now and if we take it later. Yes, it does. Your parents need it to live right now. Your grandparents need it to live right now. Power imbalance, we kind of talked about this. They physically and emotionally abuse them. They isolate them. I know someone specifically mentioned glasses and hearing aids. They hide them. They may forward their mail. And they say, oh, well, we're just doing it to monitor, but it's really a way of controlling, seeing what type of mail they get in, they get out, and they use undue influence over the victims. Indicators of financial exploitation, unusual charges, they're financially dependent, their bills are unpaid, utilities shut off. They often have insufficient funds. One of the things that we do is when we're looking at a financial case and we try to find out the date the perpetrator either came in contact, moved in, whatever the case is with the victim. And then we go 3 to 6 months before that. Why do we do that? We establish patterns. How did this person live until this person came in their life? I mentioned earlier that I testified in a case in court last week. We had an older adult who lived had a lot of money, extremely frugal, maybe spent $300 a month on personal needs. Person comes in, young lady, I'm here to take care of you and do everything for you. Monthly expenses, $12,000, $15,000, $18,000. During the interview, well, you're going to see lots of Amazon purchases, but that's all things to help take care of. Okay. Yeah, because we have a 90-year-old who's using Amazon Prime every day. All right. Don't think so. Okay. So we look at the pattern. What were they spending before the perpetrator became involved? And now what does their life look like? And is there a difference? It's a great indicator. Recent change, new best friend or love interest. This is what drives me crazy. Romance scams are huge nationwide and they're huge in Utah. Again, we have a lot of older adults. Romance scammers are fantastic at reading the obituaries. Then they Google the name, they find out who the person is. Someone's in grief, they're isolated, they're lonely, especially males. And guess what? They wrap them in. I trained at the PD yesterday and they told me about a case where a guy's given away $500,000 to a lady from Mexico he's never met. They have gone out multiple times. They've tried to convince him multiple times that this person doesn't exist. He will not listen to them. Scammers are very, 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 very good. Okay, we have 2 benefits, and this is more, I mean, this is something that any of you just need to think about as you guys make a case. We have a great internal auditor. She analyzes financial cases. And then when we get these tough cases that involve multiple assets, multiple accounts, we have a contract with a firm. We had to send it out for bid. I Bailey won the contract, and we are able to send it out and have a forensic accounting firm do it. Law enforcement loves this with us because they don't have the resources or the time to do this. And this grant that we have pays for this. So if you guys have tough financial cases, if you do work within a law enforcement agency and you know you detectives are struggling with a financial exploitation case, we are able to help. This is one of the few areas where we have services that we can pay for in addition, and we can investigate these cases. They provide us a nice little summary that shows us of all the accounts where the money came in, that pattern I'm talking about, and what is missing and what is not accounted for. And it makes our cases wrapped up into a nice tight bow where we're able to turn those over to law enforcement and prosecutors, and they love it. So on these really ugly financial cases, we should be involved, but I also strongly encourage you to get us involved. I'm not going to go over scams. Just because this isn't probably the proper setting to go over all the scams. But these are just some of the top scams targeting seniors, the imposter scam, sweepstakes, lottery. Hey, if you give us $100, you're going to win 100,000. And sadly, the people that give it are the people that make the lowest amount. People that are literally living on $800 Social Security, and they're giving it $100 away because they think they're going to win $1 million, win 100,000. Grandparent scam. I met with a lady in Utah County and she got involved in the grandparent scam, gave away $10,000 before her bank called her and stopped her. She was going down to Walmart and buying 300 iTunes gift cards in the amount of $300 each. And then she'd go home, her and her husband would go home and give it to the perpetrator. The perpetrator would say, hey, we need $300 more. They'd go out and do it. not until the Zions Bank, I say Zions, but I'll give them credit, they finally called and said, look, you're being scammed. We just noticed all these gift cards, because they all occurred within a 24-hour period. What's going on? And the bank helped them stop them. They threatened them, they told them their grandkid was in jail. Was their grandkid in jail? No. Did it even register to them that a jail would ask for an iTunes gift card? It didn't. And it's not because they lack capacity. What were they concerned about? Their grandkid. And the lady looked at me, deadpan in the eye, and she says, I just want you to know my kids are all mad at me and they've all yelled at me and lectured me. She said, but I'll tell you right now, if I got the call again and I thought my grandkid was in jail, I'd do it again. She dead straight. They were really lucky. They got their money back. Not all victims get their money back. Affinity fraud. Affinity fraud is huge in Utah because affinity fraud happens through religious affiliations. That's where, hey, I'm your neighbor. Guess what? If you buy into this for $1,000, we've got a really good thing going, and they get this pyramid scheme going on. You're going to get $1,000 back. And what they do is they give small returns, and then all the new people that sign up, that's how they pay the small returns, and the promises never come through, and the people start bilking people. There's been cases all over the news lately about all these people that have bilked millions of dollars out of older adults. The federal crimes section has gone after. It's been great. They've got them, but they milk people for millions, and it's because they're trusted and they're known to the person. Funerals, they have people buy into funeral plans that don't exist, and sadly, the vulnerable adults passed away, and the kids are the ones that deal with that because they're like, yeah, this isn't a legitimate funeral plan. You never did this with us. Computer takeover scams. People are starting to get a little wise to those now. My dad fell to that one. Telemarketers, romance, investment scams, counterfeit prescription drugs. A lot of people think they're getting their drugs cheaper if they order from Canada or Mexico, but they're not even the real thing. And then health insurance and home repair fraud is really big in Utah in the summer. Tree trimming is huge. They'll come, people will come to their door, they'll give them a business card that they made on the little home computer, and they'll say, hey, we'll come trim your trees, you need to pay half up front. People pay them, never see them again. Big. Okay, so here are some resources. As I said, we do not investigate scams or consumer fraud. So here are the people that do. And I want to highlight the one on the bottom left, the National Elder Fraud Hotline, because if you are working with as professionals, it's great if you can call all these other resources, but they're somewhat complicated. I'm telling you that I would give up trying to make a report on the FTC website. It's complicated. However, then about 4 years ago, the US Senate developed the National Elder Fraud Hotline, where they get a call, they get to speak to a live person, they get assigned a case manager, and the case manager helps them file all the necessary reports. So if you are working directly with the vulnerable adult, that bottom one is the one to go to. We called them and pretended we were a vulnerable adult, and they were fantastic. We did tell them at the end, but we wanted to see what someone had to go through. It was great. They did a great job. Okay, so collaboration with APS, I've somewhat already talked about this, but we can assist with interviews. We can look at cognition. We have subpoena power. If someone lacks capacity, we are able to subpoena medical and financial records. So that I know a lot of people love that we can help them get that. What we rely on law enforcement with is perpetrator interviews, especially when it involves sex abuse. We typically, on a case of rape, do not go out and interview. We either try to utilize the CJC or we try to have a law enforcement officer go with us on a sex abuse case. On a case where the perpetrator lives in the home and we know we need 2 people, and if we feel that there's danger, we will ask law enforcement to go with us as well. And then we are willing to collaborate on any events. I know we have a couple people on our Crime Victim Advocates Week. Anything where there's public awareness, we are totally willing to collaborate on. And now here's where I'm going to offer an apology. I brought a ton of flyers and resources, and I came loaded. They were all taken in my previous trainings. For whatever reason, I didn't think I should withhold some of these for this training, because that didn't dawn on me, that mild cognitive impairment. I just assumed I would leave with some of them. And yesterday, well, this morning, the rest of them were gone, and I went to gather my stuff, and I'm like, I literally have nothing to hand out. With that being said, I had a ton of stuff in my office. So we have brochures, flyers, informational material. We don't have cool swag because we're a state-funded agency, and they don't let us buy any of that. But we do have a lot of great informational material. My email information is on the front of the slide. I think it's in your agendas. Contact me. I have business cards if you want, and I will mail it to you. Or if you're up near us, I'll just come and drop it off to you. We have budget for it. We can print. We have them translated into Spanish. That's the only language right now we have them translated into, but we do have everything in Spanish. Just let me know. And I apologize for my not thinking and saving enough for this one. I just didn't think they'd go that fast. Okay, so working with vulnerable populations, I like this quote, this quote, the biggest communication problem is we don't listen to understand, we listen to reply. How many of you have ever been in a conversation where you just want them to shut up so you can get what you want to say out? You don't have to admit it out loud, but let's be honest. They're like, okay, I really wish they'd stop talking because I need to get this out. I already know the answer. I don't need to hear your story. I've done it before, okay? That's the problem. Sometimes we got to slow our own brains down, make sure we listen, rather than just focus on replying. When we're working with people with disabilities, it's really important to treat people as adults, especially when we're working with people with intellectual disabilities. We tend to treat them like kids. They might have intellectual thinking like kids, but they're not kids, and we need to give them that respect. We use person-centered language. We don't call people demented. We don't call people retarded. We don't call people disabled. It's people with disabilities, people with dementia, people first language. It's always people or their name first. Just always remember that. It's not their diagnosis. Speak directly to the person. It's okay to make eye contact. If you do find someone's intimidated by your eye contact, maybe soften up, but look at them. Use your voice appropriately. I remember one time there was someone in a wheelchair, and I don't know why my brain wasn't working, and I went down and I went to lean down, and all of a sudden I started talking louder. He's like, I'm in a wheelchair, I'm not deaf. And I was like, oh, well, you're right, you're not. Okay. So use appropriate tone. I don't know why my voice got louder, but it sure did. He called me right out on it. Don't speak for the person, and don't let other people speak for the person. Allow time for response. Sometimes when you're working with people that have cognitive delay, whether it's older adults or people with disabilities, they just need the time to formulate the response, and you just need to give it to them. Don't ask compounded questions. Make sure you're only asking one question at a time, because if you ask 3 in one question, they're probably trying to process which one do I answer first. Don't make assumptions. Be aware, offer accommodations. Make sure they're in a comfortable setting. If the lights are bright and you can see that they're squinting their eyes, try to move them to an area that it's not. Don't move them to a dim area. Be aware that if you're dealing with someone with Alzheimer's disease or dementia, they might struggle later in the afternoon. It's best to interview them in the morning. And you might get 2 different stories. If you want to make sure their story is consistent, go at a couple different times to find out if their stories match at the times of days. It's okay to get support from people and to have someone in the room that they're comfortable with. Just make sure that's not the person that's being accused of whatever you're looking at. And then be aware of your own reactions. I'll tell you one thing in working with people with disabilities is they watch your facial expressions and they watch your body language and they mirror you. If you look shocked, they're going to be shocked. If you look horrified, they're going to be horrified. They're going to mirror you. So try to stay calm, consistent, and be aware of the message you're sending off is what I'm trying to say. Okay, let's go back to Mary and Fred. Can someone give me a time check?
It's 2:11.
Okay, we're good. Okay, let's go back to Mary and Fred. Let's go back to our case. So we got Mary and Fred. They moved into Fred's daughter's house. So Mary is the stepmother. Well, let me rephrase that. I said that wrong. The daughter moved into Mary and Fred's home. Okay. They're in their 70s. Fred is total care, bedridden, needs care with all of his life. Mary is independent. Mary can take care of herself. They moved in. Mary and Fred want to go to the VA. There's a 10-year waiting list. Nursing homes and assisted livings will not take them because Mary does not qualify for nursing home. She could go to an assisted living, but the assisted livings won't take Fred because he's total care. And most assisted livings do not provide total care. They have to be nursing home at that point. So they can't find anyone that will take them together other than the VA, and there's a 10-year waiting list. Okay. Mary is the one that provides all of Fred cares. She bathes him, she changes him, she feeds him, she cares for him. Daughter-in-law helps. She takes him to their medical appointments. She takes him to the grocery store, make sure they have food. Daughter-in-law has taken over their accounts. Mary's capable of managing money, Fred is not. Daughter-in-law's taken it over. Mary's scared of the daughter-in-law. And then the special thing is that they did this is Mary and Fred's home. The home was paid off. They went in, they did a quick claim deed, signed the home over to them, went and took out a refinance for $300,000, quick claim deed it back, and now the debt is in Mary and Fred's name. Do we have any abuse, neglect, or and they charge them $5,000 rent to live in their own home to pay for care. Do we have any abuse, neglect, or exploitation? I see nods. What give, and knowing that we went over our allegations, what allegations do you think are present on this case? Financial exploitation, yep. What else? There's 2 more we opened for.
Neglect.
Yep, caretaker neglect. The other one's kind of hidden in there. It's just one sentence. And there's not a whole lot of information, but the allegations there. Mary's scared, emotional. Okay, so those are the 3 allegations we investigated. Could we support for financial based on the information I've given you? Correct. Could we support for emotional abuse? Maybe, because I didn't give you a whole lot of information on emotional, but yes, we supported for emotional abuse. We found out that there was enough threats and intimidation that we supported. Could we support for caretaker neglect?
Yeah.
I've heard yes, I've heard no, and I've heard not yet, and you're correct, not yet. Get the star. Okay, we couldn't because Mary was taking care of Fred. Mary didn't need help, and she was driving them to medical appointments and buying their groceries. So we could not support for caretaker neglect. Okay, here's the sad thing is, so this is an update on the case. They still live with the perpetrators. And why do you think that is?
They don't want to be separated.
They don't want to be separated. Systemic failure on our part, right? They feel like that's the only choice they have if they want to stay together because they want to move to assisted living. They can't take them. They want to move, that they're willing to move to a nursing home, and they're still on the wait list 4 years later for the VA. Okay, systemic failures. So it's a really sad case of Mary and Fred feeling like they're trapped and they don't have any choices. And so they continue to live there. Mary is now declined where she needs care. So they do qualify for an assist. They do qualify now for nursing home care because Mary actually needs the care now. But they have not moved out yet. They still live with the perpetrators. Okay, so it takes a village. I think all of us know, and I'm sure you guys come across this in your jobs, is that some days you're expected to wear 40 different hats. And you're like, I can't do it all. There's only so much I can do. Okay, but that's why it's really important that we all work together because all of us have roles within our agencies, within our positions, and it's important that we collaborate and we all help. The right hand helps the left hand. Some law enforcement tips. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. So just if you start, don't get seizures from me blinking through the screen pretty quickly. But these are things that we do train law enforcement on. We train them. And the reason why is that the prosecutors and law enforcement were part of the steering committee that developed this training. And they said, these are the things that we need to make a successful case. And there's a couple things I want to highlight that your guys' role particularly come into play. Okay, we already know that elder abuse is unreported. So when you are dealing with a vulnerable adult in your roles, the most important thing you can do is to gather any evidence that is relevant at the time. One of the biggest mistakes that we make is we meet with someone, we ask them questions, and then we think about it and we think, oh, I probably should have asked them for a bank statement. I probably should have taken a picture of that bruise. I probably should have had him go to the ER for a SANE exam. And we go back 24, 72 hours, a week later, and the bruises have faded. The same, I mean, they can still do an exam, but maybe they've washed, showered, and the evidence might not be as present. Now maybe the perpetrator knows they met with somebody and the financial records are going to be hidden. So the one part we talk about is when you go out on that initial call, sometimes, or if you're dealing with someone initially, sometimes we get so caught up in helping that person, we kind of shut our brains and we go into social worker mode and we help, and we forget to gather. Because some of that information that is so critical upon that initial contact goes away later and we're not able to access it. That's the one part I want to leave you with. Get copies of power of attorney, guardianship. Make sure you're asking questions. get to know their story. If you guys go into victims' homes and you find that it's really off and you need to take pictures, ask them, you should have permission, but take pictures of their homes. Don't call them and tell them you're coming, or don't say, okay, I'm going to come back in 2 weeks later and take pictures, because what's going to happen? The perpetrators involved, the home's probably not going to look the same. You're going to see two different homes. We always talk about the rule of 3. You take the injury of the person as a whole, the injury, and the injury next to a ruler or something you have. You want it to be, because you don't want to just have a picture of a bruise. You want to see what does that look like next to a ruler, next to a regular object that you would know. What does it look like next to a golf ball? What does it look like next to a tennis ball? Anything you have handy that is a standard scale of measurement. Interviewing, make sure the victim's comfortable. Try to make sure the perpetrator is not present, has influence over the victim. You always got to take that time and build rapport. This is a great resource. While this is designed for for law enforcement, I'm going to tell you, I have it on my app, and it is great. It's called Eagle. It was put out by the Elder Justice Initiative. University of Southern California is who maintains it. They have funding through a grant to maintain it. There are tons of resources on here. For those of you who need CEUs, there are tons of training on here. They have tools, resources, tips, checklists, flyers, brochures, and it's all free. So it's an app. Would highly recommend you. I have it on both my phones, my personal and my work. It's a great resource. If you're looking at financial cases, this just really goes into detail about how to gather financial records, what to look for. Power of attorneys, guardianships. A lot of people think that they have power of attorney and guardianship, but typically power of attorneys doesn't mean you control someone's life. Power of attorneys are typically medical or financial. Doesn't mean you get to have decisions that in fact they get to go to a senior center or not. Just means you're looking over their finances, and usually it's only if they're incapacitated. So look at, get their records, and when someone says I have power of attorney and guardianship, great. Can you show that to me? If you have access to court links through your job, go to the courts and pull up the guardianship. Power of attorneys aren't kept in the court links, but guardianships are. So you can't pull it up. Person says they have guardianship, they don't have guardianship. It has to go through the courts, has to be reviewed, has to be publicly notified. Okay, credit reports, just always get credit reports. Again, I'm not going to go through a lot of this because this is more stuff that detectives will look at. Making sure you're looking at medical records, time, if it happens in a facility, incident reports, time sheets. Some facilities have cameras in the hallways. They can't have cameras in rooms, but they can have them in the hallways. So, is there surveillance video of people going in and out of the room? Are you able to identify and narrow it down? One of the things that is prosecuting older adults is very tough, because oftentimes prosecution takes years, and older adults either just give up and they just don't want to do it anymore. They might pass away, or memory cognition issues might set in. So it's important to have your case nice and ready, because you can't wait 3 years. You don't know with any of us, we don't know what's going to happen in 3 years, right? So we've got to be careful. Making sure, this is all about prosecution, just making sure that the law enforcement screens them with the prosecutors, and making sure that as soon as charges are filed, notify the victim advocates, make sure that they have resources, that they're being connected, making sure you're spending extra time preparing the victims, constant communications, exposing a victim maybe with disabilities or older adult to a courtroom. Don't just bring them in the day they have to testify, and they don't, especially someone with disabilities, and they don't know the setting they're getting into. Go expose them, go walk them in, go sit them in a jury box, go explain, help them through the process. I want to talk about the benefits of MDTs. How many of you in this room, if any, participate in a multidisciplinary team in your area? Rock stars. Okay, MDTs are so critical. We have a grant through the Office of Victims of Crime that's focused on building multidisciplinary teams throughout the state. I have a fantastic grant coordinator who had a cute little baby who's on maternity leave till June, so I'm trying to do her job. I'm not as good, I'm telling you right now. But she has developed 11 multidisciplinary teams throughout the state. The only place that we do not have one is up in Logan. And we are currently working on that. And she gets back, that's the last area we need to build one in. So if you're from Bear River, I apologize. We're working on it. Anywhere else in the state, you have access to a multidisciplinary team. Multidisciplinary team. Access to coordinated services. We want victim advocates on every multidisciplinary team in the state. We have them on most, but when I was told how many victim advocates they are, I was like, oh yeah, we're very underrepresented. So we do at least have one in most of our MDTs. But it really helps you go and connect your people that you're working with the services. I know I was talking to a victim advocate from, I guess I won't say because I know she's the only one in that jurisdiction, but in the Salt Lake area, she's like, I'm happy to come when I have a case, but I just don't have a ton of cases on vulnerable adults. But it'd be really great if you have time to come. I know your time is limited. Even your voice, even your opinion, it's really great to have, or even if you have someone specialized for vulnerable adults in your agency, would be great to have you as regular members. Here is our elder justice locating map. This is on our website again, and this actually is also on the Eagle app that I showed. You can click on here, you can click on Utah, and you can narrow it down to county, and it will pull up the MDT, it'll pull up the day they meet, the time they meet, and it'll pull up who is the coordinator of that MDT. And so if you have a case to staff and you say, hey, I haven't been to this MDT before, but I'm working with someone and I really need a connection and help the community resources, can I staff this case? You can email them and you can staff that case. You can also email me in the meantime. I'm happy to get you into any of the case staffings. If you say, hey, I have a case in this area, which MDT do I go to? I'm not quite sure. I'm happy to help. We broke our MDTs out as they relate to our 12 area agencies on aging. So we have 29 counties in the state, and all of them are designated to a particular area agency on aging by region. So that's why we have an MDT in every region. So an MDT like Salt Lake County just covers Salt Lake County. But you got, 6 county covers 6 counties. 5 county down in St. George covers 5 counties. So if you're ever in question about which MDT covers the person you're working with, feel free to give me a call. We already talked about who's on there. We have APS, law enforcement, prosecution, victim advocates. And some of them we have our mayor and local council representatives. We have mental health on all of our MDTs, health department on some. Code enforcement are big in Utah County. They have a great support. They make all their city folks go. So Utah County has a huge citywide presence. Aging services and disability services, DSPD is on every MDT. EMS comes to some, and fire. Housing authorities are on some, not all. VA are on some, not all. Animal services, again, that's a Utah County thing. Same with public utilities, water. They pull all their city folks in. I know Orem and Provo, they pull in all their monthly, they pull in everybody. Trauma-informed care. This is a whole separate training, so I'm not going to get into the details of it because I really want to end with resources and talking about you guys. But I think we all know that when we're dealing with victims, we got to use a trauma-informed approach, right? What's a trauma-informed approach? We need to make sure that the victim comes from a place of safety, that they're, well, I shouldn't say they come from a place of safety. That didn't sound right. They are in a safe place when we are working with the victim, that they feel safe, they feel comfortable working with us, and they're not in danger when we're working with them. We want to have trustworthy and transparency, and that's a tough one. I know we have to work with victims, and they maybe a crime's been committed and they say they don't want anything done, and we have to say, I apologize, I have to report this to law enforcement. Just like you guys have to report, we're a mandatory reporting state, all of us, we have to report to law enforcement if a crime's been committed, whether the victim wants us to or not. Law enforcement may choose not to press charges, but we have to report, and that can break trust. So it's a tough thing in the will. Peer support, are they connected? Are they connected to caregiving resources? Are they connected to peer giving resources? Do they have the support in the community they need? Do they just need to go to a senior center? Are they aware there's a senior center in their area? Is there a rec center? Is there a library? Is there volunteer services? Are there things that they can do to get out amongst their peers? Are they collaborating, and do they have a voice? One of the biggest things with victims, and prosecutors have said this, we will have more success on a case if the victim feels they have a voice and they are part of the process rather than the process being forced upon them. So we've got to make sure they have a voice. And then we've also got to consider gender, cultural, and historical issues. Cultures run different. So do gender issues. There might be different challenges on top of the crime itself that we need to take into consideration. Benefits, it just produces better outcomes for both the victim, and it turns into successful prosecution. Okay, I want to end the training. We're going to end with resources, but I want to spend the next few minutes talking about vicarious trauma. Can I get another time check?
226.
226. Oh, you guys might get, oh, I guess I can't say it'll get for someone else might come on. But anyways, I'm gonna probably end early. So vicarious trauma, we have a grant through the International Association of Chief Police, and we're currently working with 6 partners in the Salt Lake area to work to include the Center for Persons with Disabilities, the Utah Pride Center, FJC, and Salt Lake City PD, and Salt Lake City Fire EMS, and the Urban Indian Center. We're working on this grant because we want to become a trauma-informed organization and a trauma-informed society. What is that? What is vicarious trauma? Anybody know? Trauma we experience, meaning you, right? You guys all work in a field where you see traumatic things every day. I've probably traumatized half the room today. Okay, with the pictures earlier, and I apologize for that. However, is it always tough at 5 o'clock just to go home and say, oh, work was great today. I had the best day ever. Maybe some days, but is that tough? Okay, we talk about vicarious trauma because often we don't recognize that when we start getting stressed, when we start getting burned out, when we start having problems with our spouse or our loved ones or our partners, when we start screaming at our kids, when we start not wanting to talk to mom and dad and just letting that call go to voicemail, we've just had enough. We experience trauma and it affects us in many different ways. And unfortunately, in this field, we have a high amount of turnover. People get in and they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't get to help and hug people every day. This is a tough job, right? I can't solve the world's problems. I go crazy every day, work for the state system. There's 20 million approval processes just to get a form signed. Okay, like it's not as what we think it is. We think we win in this field because we want to help people, and there are so many systematic barriers that come along with the trauma that we're dealing with. But can we help other people if we are in an unhealthy place? Anybody say yes to that? We try, right? But we got to take care of ourselves. So I'm not going to go off for 9 years about self-care, but I am going to leave with a message about taking care of yourself. We have the Vicarious Trauma Toolkit. This is a critical resource for anybody who is a supervisor in the room. Is your organization trauma ready? We did a survey last year. Guess what? We failed. We're Adult Protective Services. We have investigators, frontline people going into horrible situations. You saw them every single day. We failed our survey. Okay, so what did we do? For the last year, we have worked very diligently in putting policies, practices at the leadership level to ensure that our team members have the resources they need. Now, again, self-determination, right? And this is where everybody comes into play. We can provide all the resources we want, but if someone wants to live in crisis, are they going to live in crisis? Yep. We can't make you take them. Almost every agency out there should have some access to mental health care. If you do not, there are free resources online if you are experiencing a tough time on the job. As supervisors, you should always have opportunities for your team members to have debriefances after a tough case. Make sure that you have moments where you can just enjoy and be happy and be you. But the responsibility comes on every one of us. It doesn't matter what our role is within our organization or who we work for. We have to be willing to say, I need help. This was tough. You have to be, supervisors have to make sure that, you know what, if someone comes to me, they're not going to be a risk at losing their job. Saying, you know what, maybe this job isn't for you then. And maybe it's not. But you don't want to say that out loud in the middle of a crisis situation, right? Okay, you want to be supportive. You want to listen. You want to make sure you have practices in place. It's a very good guide. If any of you are interested to know if your team feels you're trauma ready, go to that. You can take a survey. You can send the survey out to your team. You can learn a lot about your organization. So who's at risk? People who have prior traumatic experiences, people who are isolated, people who tend to avoid feelings. Do you think we have a lot of law enforcement that avoids feelings and avoids tough cases? Yeah. Yep. It is becoming more acceptable. It has historically hasn't been acceptable. It hasn't been historically. And I know that law enforcement across the state is working hard on making it acceptable. People who have difficulty expressing feelings, new employees, they come in again, you want to come in, save the world, and you find out that, man, it's tougher than I thought. Lack of support processes in place. People who have difficulty managing their emotions. People start to feel fatigue, sleepiness. I read this study and I'm like, oh boy, I'm driving drunk every day. And I'll tell you why. Not because I'm drinking every day. However, I do not get sleep. I am so sleep deprived, it's scary. And I read that if you get less than 6 hours sleep a night, it's like driving drunk. I was like, oh, okay. But it's because stress. I have one of those minds, I don't know about you guys, it doesn't shut down. I lay down in bed, then the more I get thinking, the worse off it gets. Meditation doesn't work. Okay, so you gotta sleep, you gotta take care of yourself. I'm a poor example. Okay, being easily distracted, loss of sense of meaning in life. What am I here for? Why am I doing this? I just give up. Relationship problems are a big one. Domestic violence, suicide, substance abuse is huge in this field. And it's because people don't know how to cope healthy, they cope unhealthy. They're not able to turn it off and just go home and enjoy time with their family or by themselves or go on a hike or go on a walk, whatever makes them happy. They result, I'm going to get home and I'm going to open that can of beer. I'm going to get home and I'm going to take these drugs to help. You start to have relationship problems. Feeling vulnerable, increased irritability. We just talked about destructive coping mechanisms. Avoiding work. All of a sudden you think, man, I need a mental health day. That's all right, great. I encourage everybody to take a mental health day. I take one every spring because I love springtime. That's a great time for me to focus on my mental health. However, when you start calling in sick every day, because you'd rather call in sick, and you know you got the time there rather than face your job, you gotta look at, are things okay? So what can you do as a coworker? Be aware, reach out, be kind, and don't isolate. If you see someone who is very isolated, very quiet, is it the personality? Or is it because they're really struggling and they really feel that they don't have anybody to reach out to? Be aware, just like we're aware with our victims, be aware of yourself and be aware of your coworkers. We all have days where we want to go in the office and isolate, because sometimes it's just because we want to get stuff done, right? But is it common? Is it daily? Or is it someone who's been very social and then all of a sudden isolates? You notice a difference in their behavior. Encourage people to attend to the basics. As supervisors, when you're having your staff meetings, you should always have something on self-care, and you don't have to sit and hammer the word self-care down people's throats. Have something on, hey, look, you guys, I read this about sleep, or I read this about fatigue, or I read this about nutrition, and just have an educational moment that people can walk away with. As a supervisor, make vicarious trauma part of the job. And I think, I have not known too many crime victim advocates where this is hidden. Among law enforcement, it's a bigger deal. But I think we do a pretty good job of recognizing it and knowing what it's about. Supervisors, if you can, I know this is not always an option, allow flexible work schedules. Can someone work at home one day a week? Any little thing that you can do that maybe helps someone have a work-life balance so that they can have that time is great to do. I'm not going to read this quote other than the last line, but it goes back to my question earlier. To help others, you first need to help to recognize, I better read it instead of try to quote it. To help others, we must recognize the need to help ourselves first. Because if we want to help others, we need to be healthy if we're going to be successful. We might get away with it for a little while, but eventually it's going to start to show. All right. I'm going to wrap this up with some resources. These are all on our website. You can take pictures, we'll email it out, but they're all on our website as well. And I add to it. But some training resources. You have the National Adult Protective Services, which is NAPSA. FinCEN is financial records, so that's more for detectives. You have NW3C, which provides a lot of great free training for law enforcement to get their post hours. They also provide training, and some of them are identified for CEUs. IC3 is great for law enforcement as well. You have the TARP, which is the Adult Protective Services Technical Resource Center. They have a ton of resources and videos and educational on there. They have a lot. They have some stuff on there about trauma-informed care, quality assurance measures, things outside the scope. And even if you're looking at your overall picture, they have some great resources. Elder Justice Initiative always has great free webinars. I take at least probably 2 a month. EAGLE, we've already talked about. SAFTA is another financial abuse training one. Say IACP's Elder Abuse Roll Call, that's for law enforcement. And then you've got your services for working with vulnerable populations. These are all your state resources. These are statewide. So if you live in a rural, remote places, all these are available to you. You have our agency, you have DSPD, Division of Service for People with Disabilities, you have Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health. They got funding in the legislature a couple of years ago because mobile crisis outreach teams for people who are having a mental health crisis were not available statewide. They are almost to where they are available in every state. I know that they just got San Juan's up and going. So if you ever need that, call the number and they will tell you. And that's when they send licensed professionals out to help if someone is having a mental health crisis. You have the suicide prevention hotline. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the DV hotline or know how to get that. Then we have a silver alert. How many have seen a silver alert going out? There were 3 in the last 2 weeks. Okay, it's just like the Amber Alert, meaning, but it's an older adult or a vulnerable adult who may be wandering and gone missing from their home or their nursing home. They now have a silver alert. It goes out. Alzheimer's Association was key in getting that through. Community resources, all of you guys for older adults have area agency and aging. Again, we have 29 counties, but all of them are broken down into 12 areas, which all have services such as Meals on Wheels, in-home services, transportation, caregiver support, legal services. Utah Legal Services and Disability Law Center serve statewide. So if you need someone who needs some free legal assistance, make sure you're aware of those resources and refer people to them. Even though they're based out of Salt Lake, a lot of people aren't aware that they cover statewide. Salt Lake County has specific resources for refugees, and then we have senior health insurance. So someone doesn't understand their Medicare, their Medicaid, they're not aware of the benefits that they get, they can call and get free counseling. We have the Alzheimer's Association, we have the FJCs up in the Wasatch Front, 211. I don't know how many of you got to their website, but it is a plethora of resources, and they're working really hard. They're one of our key partners, and they're specifically working hard to make sure that there's resources specific for older adults. Utah Aging is a new hotline, a new website, not hotline. It went live in January. That's another place where we're driving traffic for older adults. We're putting multiple resources on there. It's just getting built. So some of, you'll see a lot of the tiles, some of them are still empty, but a lot of them, we just sent a big list over on legal resources. It has all the senior centers, has all the area agencies and what counties they cover if you ever have any question. And so we're trying to drive older adult resources all to that one place. You've got the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. If it's facility-based and you suspect and need investigation, they are fantastic. AARP's fraud network is great. If you want to know what scams are hitting your area, pulls up a map of the United States. You can go to Utah, you can narrow right down to your zip code, and you can see current real-time what's hitting more. National Council on Aging is a great resource. If you want handout for event resources, like I said, we have a bunch that I clearly didn't bring, but also Money Smart for older adults. You can go there, you can order a bunch, and you can hand those out. They're great. They have many different resources for free. I tell people we always leave the do not call registry on there, but I'm on there. I get scam calls. It drives me crazy, but we leave it on there. Someone struggling with their Social Security, VA, or conservator and guardianship, those are the numbers to call. Specialized resources, this is a link. If you scan that code, it should take you to a Google Drive link. It's a little bare right now. We're working on it. And one thing we are doing, I have one of my team members, all that stuff on vicarious trauma that we've developed is going to be moved into that link as well. So like I said, any of you who are interested in that area or improving that within your organization, that will be on there within the next month. FinCEN is financial. We do have the victim rights brochure, which I actually think Tally sent me. Or Hildy, we have our brochures on there, so you can print them if you want to. And then Bailey's the one that does our forensic accounting. But most important, I just want to know that we're here to work with you. We want to work with you. Please work with us. We all know we have limitations. We all know we have strengths, but we're stronger together than as alone. Thank you for my time. I apologize that it was not the most fun training, but I hope it brought some awareness, and I hope next time you suspect, you will report. Any questions? You don't need to clap. That's enough. I don't clap.
We
That's
do want to
embarrassing.
clap to thank you, but I want to make sure there are questions. You do have. And I know it's not a good topic, but we really appreciate it because these crimes are happening and we also just kind of ignore. So thank you so much. And that is a lot of great resources. To keep things moving, I'm actually going to have Dell and Mariah